Episode 106 of the Interpretation Station is called to order. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Belated Merry Christmas to all of you, and, well, I guess Happy New Year, or whatever other holidays you guys may be celebrating. I hope they are all good. I hope that you have a good rest, a good holiday. We all need one. 2021 was a pretty shitty year, wasn't it? And 2022 is probably going to be pretty shitty as well. But anyway, you never know. You never know. What's today's episode, guys? We've got a special episode for you today. They're all episodes of the Interpretation Station, of course, are special. We are reverting to the WAM band Thank You Yolande format. We've got a statement by Cameroon. Cameroon's always one of my favourite sources of statements. Like, in the same way that in Spanish, I do like a bit of Cuba, a bit of Venezuela. From French, you know what? I do like Cameroon. Cameroon always gives them it's a different style to Cuba and Venezuela. There's always a lot of detail, a lot of precise detail, a lot of precise vocabulary, and it's really good. The Cameroon statements, I find, are a really good just source of vocab for African French, both institutional vocab and also that's always quite high register as well. Now, the inspiration for today's episode, the title of today's episode, you'll see, is Cameroon in Degraded style. Now, why have I called it that? Well, the background to this, it's a bit embarrassing, really. So about a month or two ago, if you follow me on the LinkedIn group, someone sent me an article, and the article was called Advice for Conference Interpreters Who Are Struggling in the Booth, How to Switch into Degraded Mode to Ensure Basic Minimum Performance. Now, this article was written by a gentleman who most of you will almost certainly know, Mr. Chris Guichaud de Fortis. Now, most of you will know him. However, me living in my 12, 13 years and not really giving a toss about what happens outside my little UN bubble, I've got to admit, I wasn't so familiar with him. And anyway, someone sent me this article that he wrote, and it's a great article. So I'm going to leave the link to that article in the description box. It's a must-read, right? And it really resonated with much of the stuff that, I talk about in my episodes and on the LinkedIn group on just approaches, just how to get the best way of getting through tough statements or getting through statements when you're not having a good day. When I talk about, just stripping everything down to the bare minimum. And I was reading this, I thought, bloody hell, this is really good. I've got to forward this on to people. I've got to pass the message on. Maybe they haven't heard of this guy. Well, it turns out, so I forwarded it on and I said, got to read this article by this guy called Chris Guichaud de Fortis. It's really good. Well, it turns out this was like the conference interpreting equivalent of, let's say, living under a rock for several decades, coming out, taking an interest in electric cars, and then picking up a magazine with an article by, let's say, Elon Musk, and thinking, oh, bloody hell, this is a really good article. This guy really knows what he's talking about. And then putting up on your social media page, guys, you've got to read this guy by this guy, Elon Musk. He really seems to know a lot about electric cars. You got to see it. Yeah, so that's sort of what I did, and well, there you go. You live and learn. But anyway, I will. I'm all embarrassed. Anyway, but yeah, so read that article. As I say, I'm going to put in the description box. But then I thought, so I actually met Chris the other day. Spoke to him a few days ago because we're both going to be appearing at the TERP Summit in January. We're speaking on similar issues. So we had a bit of a meet-up via Zoom, had a good long chat. And I thought, it gave me the inspiration. I should do an episode just, sort of kind of based on the approaches that he suggests in this article. So that's what we're going to do with this statement by Cameroon. We're going to first look, we're going to go through the interesting vocab first of all, and then I'm going to look, then we're going to go through it sort of in two ways. We're first going to look how he would do it if all the climatic conditions were conducive, good sound, good speaker, and so on, looking at the best way of rendering a lot of the vocab. And then the second time, we're going to look at how we would do it if things were bad. If we'd come in, let's say, the morning of that statement, hangover from the night before, feeling rough, crap sound, crap speaker. How are we going to break this down? How are we going to get through this statement? Okay, so that's the plan. So I am now going to share the screen with you so that you can see the statement. So there you go. So you should be able to see this. A statement by Cameroon during interactive dialogue with the Special Rapporteur on Justice and Reparation. So there's a lot of legalese, okay, in this statement. Just to warn you, it's just a page long. So anyway, I've highlighted here the interesting vocab. So we're going to go through that first, okay? So, the first thing that we get here, son rapport riche et édifiant. You're going to hear that all the time from not just African delegations, French delegations too. You always want a couple of good adjectives, positive adjectives to describe reports, and this is a classic combination. Son rapport riche et édifiant. So, my advice is we'll think of words like thought-provoking. I often talk about thought-provoking report, eye-opening, informative, instructive, compelling. Pick any two and use them, okay? You don't need, you could say a rich and edifying report, but it sounds like a bit of a cheat if you're doing the exam. And if someone here, I think they're going to, if someone's, and I know a lot of you guys are doing the exam next week, and I think if the invigilator, if the examiner is rich and edifying, they're going to immediately think, oh God, he's doing a lot of these sort of dodgy calcs. So you think of, bear in mind a couple of those answers, of those alternatives: compelling, thought-provoking, eye-opening. Now, another thing they use a lot in French, le Cameroun s'est doté de plusieurs instruments nationaux. And you know what? I've always say acquire. Cameroon's always acquire. For years, I've been saying has acquired several national instruments, okay, and it's okay, acquire's all right. But you know what? It's really, I think, has adopted more than acquired. I always think with acquire, there's some sort of transaction going on. But we really talk about adopting, okay? I think it's just a synonym for le Cameroun a adopté. So, I would say for s'est doté de, maybe it's best to go with has adopted several national instruments. Or enacted, perhaps. Moving on down, crucial concept here. Engager la responsabilité des auteurs. Okay, auteur, perpetrators. That's the main word you want for auteur when it comes to a crime. Engager la responsabilité. Now, there's a few sort of tweaks in French how this can be said, but the key expression to note, to remember in English is to hold accountable. I've said this loads of times, okay? So it doesn't really matter what the tweak is and what the nuance is in the French. If you just have that hold accountable, we need to hold the perpetrators accountable. Or you can say, well, in English has its own tweaks, I guess. Hold the perpetrators to account. Whatever you're more comfortable with. But for la responsabilité, when it's about criminal, la responsabilité criminelle in that regard, hold accountable. We need to ensure accountability. Ensure accountability for the perpetrators. Find something that you're very comfortable with. Okay, so I've underlined here, réparation aux victimes. Okay, so you have all these sort of words that begin with R that are synonyms for this. Okay, you can just say here, it's fine, reparations. There's also, restitution, the idea of being given something back. Remedy, redress, which are really good words. I think he's going to use remedy later on. So that's what's useful is they all begin with R. Okay, it's very easy at least for three to come to mind immediately. So reparation, restitution, remedy, redress, and I would say the safest of all to go for of those four, maybe remedy. Okay, but they're all good. And on top of that, you got compensation as well, right? Now, next paragraph. Divers mécanismes assurent le droit à la vérité et la justice. Now, this is an expression they use a lot in French. This, some mechanism assure la coordination, le droit. I guess the straightforward solution is maybe just to say ensure. Various mechanisms ensure the right to truth and justice. Again, that doesn't sound that great in English. And I thought to myself, what do we say here really in English? Native English speaker might actually say that there are various mechanisms that ensure or uphold the right to truth and justice. I think there's in English, we'd probably be more likely to go with a sort of sentence beginning "there are." Okay. There are a number of tools that do this. So again, if you're feeling really confident, you could do it that way, right? You could just change the syntax a bit and go, yeah, there are various mechanisms in place to ensure the right to truth and justice. But again, if you were trying to just stay with a speaker, various mechanisms ensure the right to truth and justice, provide for the right to truth and justice. To provide for is an important phrase to be familiar with and to be able to use confidently. Okay, then we go down here. Now, here we have a couple of sort of in-house well, I don't know actually if they're just specific to Cameroon, but a couple of bits of jargon, a couple of mechanisms that are very sort of unique to the French legal system, to the francophone generally the legal system. L'information judiciaire et l'instruction à l'audience. Now, another handy thing with Cameroon is that Cameroon nowadays always gives their statements. When they give a statement, it's always in French and in English, because actually, most people seem to think that Cameroon is just a francophone country, but no, Cameroon is made up of two entities. Again, I've said this before: a French-speaking entity and an English-speaking entity. So they actually always provide their statements in French, but also in English. So you can cheat a bit. So I've cheated a little bit here, and they do often refer to these things: l'information judiciaire and l'instruction à l'audience. And so it's a fairly good bet. There's a fairly good benchmark to go by. You can be pretty sure that this is what the sort of established English equivalent is for these two modalities or for these two instruments. So for information judiciaire, they just say judicial information, okay? And for l'instruction à l'audience, they say the investigation at the hearing. Okay, so there's nothing fancy, actually. That's what the English equivalents seem to be. So, like I say, if the Cameroon English speakers are good with that, they're perfectly good solutions to follow. Now, we have the Code de procédure pénale. So the one thing I'd say here, when you hear pénal, I would tend to think criminal, okay? The criminal procedure code as opposed to the penal procedure code. Penal code seemed to be, I think in English, they sort of maybe were sort of used up until maybe the 1970s, 1980s, but I think nowadays you talk more about the criminal code. It's not that the penal code is never used, but I think at the UN, at any rate, you're on safer ground when you hear pénal is to go with criminal, so the criminal procedure code. Dans la localité de Ngarbou, so an idea here, you could say in the district of Ngarbou, or in and around. In and around is always a good expression to use, okay, in that sort of context, okay, la localité. In and around Ngarbou. Une commission d'enquête, you could just play safe here and just say an investigative commission is probably at least the first thing that would spring to my mind. But you also have a commission of inquiry. A commission of inquiry is used a lot, and actually, the situation in Syria, for example, I think there's a commission of inquiry being set up there. I think they're going to do one for Palestine as well. My only thought is it something that is a commission of inquiry used more for international investigations? I somehow get the feeling that at national level it's the emphasis is more on the word investigation, but I think you can go with either an investigative commission or a commission of inquiry, whatever you prefer. À titre d'illustration, if you watched episode 100 with me and the head of the Interpretation Station fan club worldwide, Dwayne Parker, greatest episode in Interpretation Station history, we discussed this phrase actually, à titre d'illustration. So an idea I had was a case in point. You might say a case in point was in 2020. You could just say, for example, that's the sort of straightforward solution. But again, if you're feeling good, just to not always be saying, for example, all the time, a case in point. Agent de la police. I think in English, you could say police agents, I guess, but I think we more like to talk about police officers. Whenever I talk about, police officials in the police, it tends to be police officers. Fait l'objet de sanctions disciplinaires. Okay, you could follow the French syntax here. Have been subject to disciplinary sanctions. I think you could get away with just fine. But also, I think often you talk about, when officials are charged with an offence, they are often disciplined. I think here you could just say 9 police officers have been disciplined, right? What do you think? I think we use that quite a lot in English, rather than having to go to the whole trouble of saying have been subject to disciplinary sanction. Or have for faire l'objet. Now, this is another thing I sometimes say as an alternative to being subject to. An alternative there is to have undergone disciplinary sanctions. Okay. Témoigne de la volonté de l'État du Cameroun. Okay, the simpler way to just do this is demonstrates the willingness of the state of Cameroon. But also another word just came to me not 10 minutes ago. Showcases the willingness of the state to combat impunity. Do you like that? Showcase? Makes me think of whenever I say the word showcase, it always reminds me of some shitty quiz I used to watch back in the late 1980s or early 90s. What was it? The Price is Right with Leslie Crowther. And I'm sure there was a section in the quiz, only you guys from the UK will remember this, who are of sort of my generation. And I'm sure it was something like the final showcase. That's what that word always makes me think of. But I think that would work quite well here. Showcases the willingness of the state of Cameroon. Jugement de condamnation, guilty verdict. Okay, that's an important idea to remember. Guilty. Remember in English, we have guilty verdicts. Not guilty verdicts. Okay, for not guilty, you've also got the option of saying an acquittal. Remember that word, acquittal. But I think generally for jugement de condamnation, go with guilty verdict. Another important word here, whenever talking about courts, in this occasion it's saisine du juge civil. So the word I would go for here is referral. In fact, they actually use it here. Okay, the Cameroons use referring the case to. Certainly when they talk about the International Criminal Court, when some case, of alleged crimes against humanity or atrocities occurs and they want to take it to the, and there's talk of taking it to the ICC, they always talk about referrals to the ICC. So remember that for saisine, referral. And then finally, this is interesting. Okay, sur le fondement de l'article 61 du CPP, aux victimes ou à leurs ayants droit. Okay, usually when I hear ayants droit, I usually go with rights holders. Okay, but I'm thinking here, what would we say here? That it's talking about réparation est ouverte aux victimes ou à leurs ayants droit. So I guess if the victim died as a result of whatever happened, I think usually, any compensation would go to their next of kin, right? This is a suggestion. That's an important expression to remember, I think, in English, whenever you're doing sort of legalese stuff. Next of kin. So Cameroons say they're beneficiaries. Okay, that doesn't sound bad. That also sounds a good alternative. But put what you think in the comments if you've got a better idea. But I think next of kin is a good solution. Now let us look at how we would do a sight translation of this. Going through it, on the one hand, if we're on form, everything's great. And then the other alternative, in the degraded mode, we're going to pretend we're hungover, stinking headache. How are we going to get through this statement? Okay, so first of all, let's do the first version. Assuming we're in fine fettle. Okay, Madam President, my country welcomes and congratulates the Special Rapporteur for his thought-provoking, compelling report. Despite not having a normative or institutional framework specific to the issue of truth, justice, and reparation, or maybe actually in English we might say, despite not having a specific truth, justice, and reparation normative or institutional framework. I think maybe, if that's how an English speaker might put it. Cameroon has adopted several national instruments and is a party to regional and international instruments which allow it to properly address this topic. These instruments seek to establish the truth into allegations of violations of human rights. They offer a platform to victims. I was thinking about this, une tribune aux victimes, tribune, rostrum, podium, would we say that in English? I think maybe a platform. They give a voice to victims is another way you could do it. They hold the perpetrators accountable, they bolster the rule of law, and they provide reparation to the victims. In this regard, various mechanisms are there to ensure the right to truth and justice. There's a slight alternative of doing it that way. Rather than saying there are various mechanisms, you can say there are various mechanisms are there to ensure the right to truth and justice. I think that sounds quite nice. This includes administrative investigation, which can be conducted by the public administration and by the independent public entities or bodies for entité, such as the Cameroon Human Rights Commission. That's also the case with judicial investigation, judicial information, and investigation at hearing, whose modalities are set forth inter alia in Law 26.7 of 12th July 2016 on the Code of Criminal Procedure and Law 27.12 of 12th July 2017 on the Military Justice Code. In some cases, like that of the allegations of human rights violations in the district of Ngarbu, an independent commission of inquiry was created. Furthermore, the Cameroon judicial system contributes to bolstering the rule of law by criminally sanctioning, pursuant to public equitable debates, the perpetrators and accomplices in human rights abuses. Okay, atteinte. So I always say how you got violation and atteinte. And so in English, for violation, obviously I say violation, but atteinte, a good synonym here, is an abuse. I always go with that. Okay, human rights abuses without prejudice to disciplinary sanctions for law enforcement agents. Application de la loi, law enforcement officials, law enforcement agents. A case in point was in 2020 when 27 penitentiary administration agents and 9 police officers were subject to disciplinary sanctions for acts amounting to violations of human rights. These sanctions, supported inter alia by remedy open to the victims, showcases the willingness of the state of Cameroon to combat impunity. With respect to reparations or compensation, they take the form of damages, dommages intérêts. That's another useful word to remember in the context of compensation, reparation. Damages, you receive damages in this amount, and is accompanied by a guilty verdict, or maybe, or results from a guilty verdict. Furthermore, the option of referral to a civil judge for the purposes of reparation is open on the grounds of Article 61 of the Criminal Procedure Code, le CPP. It refers back up to this, the code, right? Up here, the Code de Procédure Pénale. To the victims and their next of kin, I thank you. Okay, so that's how you would do it if you're on really top form. Now, how would we do this if we were in anything but top form? And we're reverting to degraded mode. And like I say, when you read that article by Chris, link is in the description box, there's a lot, there is preparation that goes into moving into degraded mode. I mean, mentally, you've got to basically say, I've done this, you say to yourself right at the start of the meeting, I'm in a bad way, I've got to make sure all the settings are right, my bass is right, my treble is right, okay, and I'm just going to keep things to the bare minimum. I might have a lot of work to do in the next 3 hours, so even if you've got easier statements, it's important to psychologically prepare yourself for the worst case scenario. So again, you'll read all that in the article. Okay, so that was scenario 1, under perfect conditions, where you had a speaker of the caliber of, I don't know, Jacques Chirac, perfect weather outside, lovely summer's day, great audio, lovely cup of coffee next to you, everything good. and you're able to deliver that statement like a pro. Now, scenario 2. Horrible winter's day. It's the morning after your birthday. You've got a reeking hangover. There's no lovely cup of tea. There's just the stale taste of all that cheap whiskey you drank last night at your party left over in your mouth. And you've got a really bad speaker, and he's coming in over RSI, and conditions couldn't be worse. So as I say, if we're going to go into degraded mode, immediately you're going to have to go into degraded mode, because you are degraded. Your body is degraded at this point. So it's just a matter of getting through this, and we're going to see what bits can we hack out of this text while focusing on the priority. And remember, that priority is that your statement, your output, should still, despite all the slicing you're going to be doing, it should still convey virtually the full meaning of the original, at least the essentials. Okay. So let's see. So right from the off, as I say, we've got a little pen out here. So we're going to be doing quite a bit of redacting of this statement. Okay, so first of all, this can go, merci madame. We'll just call her president. Okay, president. My country. Okay, salut et félicite. Let's get rid of one of those verbs, all right? Let's just say congratulates the special rapporteur. You can even drop special, because this is, let's face it, it's probably going to be, one of many statements. Everyone knows the special rapporteur is sitting up there on the podium, so you don't need to call him even the special rapporteur. So my country congratulates the rapporteur for his, let's get rid of one of these adjectives. Let's just call it for his excellent report. Okay, keep it simple. My country congratulates the rapporteur for his excellent report. Okay. Despite not having a, normatif or institutionnel, in theory, you could actually get rid of both of these. My inclination would be to keep one of them, okay? Let's say, despite not having an institutional framework specific to, but I think you could almost get away with just saying, despite not having a framework specific to truth, justice, reparations. And again, la problématique. Do you need the problématique in theory? Let's get rid of problématique and see how that sounds. So despite not having an institutional framework specific to truth, justice, and reparations, seems all right to me, to be honest. Cameroon, s'est doté, has adopted several national instruments and is a party to regional and international instruments. A classic case of being able to just degrade. Look at this. Qui permettent d'adresser utilement la dite problématique. You could just say here, say all that. Virtually all of it could go, pretty much. What if you just said Cameroon has adopted several national instruments and is a party to international and regional instruments in the field? Okay, if you want to say that address this issue, but you don't need to go to the length which allow us to usefully address this topic. No, you could just say, if you just said Cameroon has adopted several national instruments and is a party to international and regional instruments in the field. Ces instruments concourent à établir, this word here, concours, I think you can just drop concours. Okay, I mean, you could say seek to establish, help to establish, but in degraded mode, I think you could just say these instruments establish the truth as to allegations, or because we've already said the instruments, you could say Cameroon has adopted several national instruments, is a party to international and regional instruments in the field. They help establish the truth regarding allegations of human rights violations. So I think instruments could just be turned into they. Okay. Offrir une tribune aux victimes. I think the quickest way maybe here is to give a voice to, I said, in the longer version, I said give a platform, so give a voice to the victims, let the victims be heard, paraphrasing a bit. As I say, for this, remember, hold accountable, ensuring accountability, one of those two phrases, for the perpetrators It's hard to really drop any of that. Bolster rule of law. And, apporter une réparation aux victimes. Maybe say, and compensate the victims. Now, this expression, à ce titre, that can go. All right, get rid of that. I mean, you could, as simple as in English when we go, now, several mechanisms have been set up. Okay, so just a simple now would actually work in English if you wanted to just get that little nuance of the à ce titre. Okay, here I think you can just say there are several mechanisms ensure the right to truth and justice. Okay, it doesn't sound great in English, but it's in degraded mode, it's fine. Il en est ainsi. So here, you could turn this into, this includes, administrative investigations, qui peut être mené par les. Okay, we're going to get rid of all of this here. In English, you can just say this includes administrative investigations by, qui peut être mené. Just turn that into by public administration and by independent entities. You could probably get rid of public here. We've already said public administration, so we have that notion of public. This is how you've got to think, okay, when you're doing this. Like the Human Rights Commission. I'm just thinking, we could probably even delete du Cameroon because he's talking about what the instruments they have at national level. So in the context, it would probably make sense if you just said like our Human Rights Commission. C'est le cas aussi de. So this also goes for now. Okay, these three instruments here. This is the sort of thing can really throw you if you're in bad form when you hear these very sort of specific in-country mechanisms, and you just have to sort of ride with judicial investigation, information, and hearings. Is if I was in degraded mode, that's maybe how I would be looking to do it. So get rid of, we've had judicial investigation. So the judicial is already, you've got the judicial there already. Judicial investigation, information, and hearings. Without getting into all the technicalities of what an instruction à l'audience is. Take the advantage of the don by maybe putting in a full stop. Okay, this is a technique we've used more, I think, in Spanish with the long sentences, but it's also good to use it in French as well when you hear that don and you're in degraded mode. Put a full stop. Their modalities are set forth. Get rid of notamment, I don't need that. Now, what do we do with these laws? The straightforward, rather than having to get fixated over the number or even the day, is maybe you could say the law of July 2016. As long as you get the fact that it's on the Criminal Procedure Code, it really doesn't matter what the number is or the date. Okay, the year would be helpful, but see the law, its modalities are set forth in the law and the Code of Criminal Procedure of 2016. That's a nice added touch. And on the law of 2017 on the Military Justice Code. So again, those figures aren't going to mean anything to anyone in the audience, all right? So let's get rid of those dates. I'm just going to leave the year because, as I say, the year can come in handy. If you're going to get a part when they give you like this precise day, date, and year of a law, the one if you're going to get the one to focus on above all, I think is the year. In certain cases, like with the allegations of human rights violations, dans la localité de. You know what? Let's get rid of dans la localité de and just say the human rights violations in Ngarbu. I mean, does it matter if they're specifically in Ngarbu or in and around Ngarbu? I don't think in degraded mode it really matters too much. Commission of Inquiry was created. An independent Commission of Inquiry, acronym for a Commission of Inquiry, a COI. They do call them COIs. It's tough if you just throw it in immediately without giving a listener a prior warning that it's going to be what a Commission of Inquiry is. that the acronym is a COI, but I think you could still get away with it. An independent COI was created. Moreover, the système judiciaire, I think you can drop the système and just say the Cameroon judiciary, or you could just say, instead of saying the Cameroon judiciary, our judiciary. Contribue à, I think that can go. Enhances or bolsters the rule of law by sanctioning. I think pénalement you could almost drop, okay? I mean, the sanction is quite a strong verb as it is when it comes to punishment. So to sanction criminally, sanctioning, again, it's judgment call. Following a public debate, maybe you can get rid of one of these adjectives. Let's maybe get rid of equitable. Following a public debate, les auteurs et complices, the perpetrators and accomplices in human rights abuses. Again, do you need the accomplices? Again, we'll put brackets around there. It would be nice to hear it, but again, not the end of the world if you don't. Without prejudice to disciplinary sanctions for law enforcement. I think in English, you see, often we just talk about, we don't even have to refer to them as officers or agents sometimes. I think, we can say it in English, this is the responsibility of law enforcement. Just saying the law enforcement, it's implicit that we're talking about the individuals, for example, in this context. So without prejudice to disciplinary sanctions for law enforcement. À titre d'illustration, okay, keep it simple here. For example, in 2020, 27 agents de l'administration pénitentiaire. I think you could just say 27 prison officers. That's a short way of maybe doing administration pénitentiaire, or 27 corrections staff, 27 penitentiary staff, and 9 police officers ont fait l'objet de sanctions disciplinaires. How about just saying were disciplined for des faits afférents à la violation des droits de l'homme? I think if you were in real trouble, you could probably get rid of this pour des faits afférents. Ultimately they were. So what does it mean, word by word? They were disciplined for acts amounting to human rights violations. So in other words, they were human rights violations. So you could just say they were disciplined for human rights violations. These sanctions supported, let's get rid of notamment. This is a tricky, by remedy or open to the victims. So we won't bother with the showcasing this time. Just shows the willingness of the state. I think you can drop, if you just say the state, again it's implicit that we're talking about Cameroon, to combat impunity. Turning to reparations, these take the form, again, drop notamment. Dommage intérêt. Is there a nuance for dommage intérêt? I mean, I think you can just say damages resulting from a guilty verdict. You have to get that idea in the jugement de condamnation, a guilty verdict. Moreover, the option of a referral to a civil judge for reparations, so you get rid of au fin de, just for reparations, is open, based on, sur le fondement de, based on, the criminal procedure. Remember, we're talking about the CPP, the Criminal Procedure Code. Again, if you're struggling and you miss that, maybe you miss the number, what article it is. Again, often it's not that important. The articles are often not that important. What's important is that, the option of compensation is provided under that code, under the Criminal Procedure Code. So that's the important bit. To their victims and next of kin. I thank you. Okay, so is that degraded enough for you? Look at all of the scoring out we've done in that text. And I think you can do that and that you will still get the main message across to your listeners without losing anything particularly vital. It's better to have a lot of this stuff in, but again, it's not the end of the world if you don't. Guys, have you found that useful? Did you enjoy that episode? Have you learnt a few new tricks that might come in helpful? If you have, please smash the like button. Please share with your friends and colleagues. Please subscribe, most importantly. We're pushing now, going for the big 1K. I've got another 80 subscribers I need. I promised the kids when I get to 1,000, I'll take them out for dinner. So keep my kids fed, push me up to the big 1,000, and keep following me on the LinkedIn page. And of course, now we have the interpretationstation.org website, which is now open. It contains all my material that I've compiled over the last year. So make sure you go there. Lots of different language combinations that you can find there. This is probably the last episode before the new year, so I wish you all a very happy new year, whatever your plans are. And that's it. All that remains to be said, therefore, and go and look at Chris Fortis de Guichet's article. Make sure you look in the description box. All the links are there. Okay, with that, episode 106 of the Interpretation Station stands adjourned.